Keeping Forests Strategy Spotlight Series. I'm Laura Calandrella, Executive Director of Keeping Forests, and we're counting down to the end of the year with the good work that we've done in 2023 and what you can expect for 2024. If you missed the first two of our Strategy Spotlight series, please visit our News and Perspectives page on our website or subscribe to our YouTube channel. One of Keeping Forests' market-driven strategies is to find ways to compensate private landowners for the benefits that their forests provide to water quality and water quantity. Within this strategy, there are three different prongs. The first is to develop a public-facing web application that will allow buyers and sellers to quantify those forest benefits. We're also looking at scalable and replicable ways to motivate conservation action within a watershed, with the solutions focusing on payment for ecosystem services, specifically water markets. The third prong of this strategy is what we're here to talk about today, and that is, what is the role of corporations in funding one of these water markets? My belief is that corporations have a powerful role to play, and that it may be a solution that moves us more quickly towards the development of a water market itself. To help us understand the role of corporations in payment for ecosystem services markets, we have John Mulcahy, who's joining us from Georgia-Pacific as the Vice President of Stewardship. And we have Shay Flanagan, who is the Director of Sustainability and Strategy for Conservation Resources. John will help us see this from a private sector corporation lens, and Shay will give us the impact investor perspective on these issues. We are so happy to have John Mulcahy here with us today. He is the Vice President of Stewardship for Georgia-Pacific and has been a partner with Keeping Forests from the very beginning. He sits on our emerging market strategy team, which is looking at payment for ecosystem services and particularly water markets, although he has been supportive throughout in all of our strategies. And so we're welcoming him today to help give us a perspective on the corporate view on payment for ecosystem services, water markets, and why a company like Georgia-Pacific would be involved. So welcome, John. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, if you could just start by introducing yourself, giving a little bit more of an introduction than I gave, talk a little bit about what Georgia-Pacific is and what you do.
I'd be glad to. So as Vice President of Stewardship, I'm responsible for my company's ESG program. That includes our sustainable forestry program. At Georgia-Pacific, we do not own forests. So we rely upon the thousands of landowners in the United States to sustainably provide the fiber for our operations. So we work to ensure that those resources are used efficiently, that we source responsibly, that we protect endangered areas, support wildlife conservation, biodiversity. GP is a forest products company, and we make a wide variety of forest products, everything from toilet paper to 2x4s. And we've got 150 facilities across the United States, including one plus one in Canada. However, the majority of our assets are in the Southeast, and over 90% of all the wood fiber that we use in our operations comes from the United States.
Great, thank you. It's so interesting to me because you are a more traditional forest products company, right? You're using fiber that's coming from the forest, and yet you're engaged in this emerging market strategy, which is focused on payment for ecosystem services. Before we dive into that, can you briefly explain what is a payment for ecosystem services market?
The way we think about it is that forests provide a variety of ecosystem services. They include recreation, carbon sequestration, nutrient cycling, food, timber. For certain of those benefits, timber in particular, there are efficient markets to compensate landowners for selling timber. There is a price that transacts for that the landowner benefits. There are not currently scalable mechanisms for them to be compensated for certain other benefits that they provide, such as the quality and quantity of water. So despite the significant benefits that they provide to society, they're not compensated for what they provide. So Keeping Forests is really looking at payment for ecosystem services as a mechanism for landowners to get more value out of their investment in the land and hopefully reduce the incentive that they may have to convert that land to another use.
So how does your involvement or Georgia Pacific's involvement in keeping forests align with your broader environmental and business goals, your ESG goals?
Yeah, so as a forest products company, we rely upon abundant and healthy forests to create the products that we provide to meet needs in society, and need to be able to have those assets, those resources in the future. You know, one of the things that we believe is that the drivers of deforestation is not the use of forest products, but it's actually the alternative uses of land. And so strong markets for timber creates economic incentives for landowners to take care of their property and to be good stewards of the land. And so what we believe we can accomplish through this Keeping Forests initiative is to find additional income streams for those landowners to provide additional incentives for them to keep forests as forests, which helps to ensure the viability of our raw materials going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You've hit on something really key, which is a tenet of why Keeping Forests exists, is that we are seeing that land conversion happening across the South. And so creating robust markets beyond just traditional forest products is really important here, and why the Keeping Forest Partnership chose to work on emerging markets. So you've given us a little bit of a flavor for why Georgia Pacific might be engaged in creating a PES, or Payment for Ecosystem Services, water market. What motivations do you think corporations more broadly might have for engaging in a market like this?
Yeah, I think oftentimes forest products is the first industry that people think about in terms of the impacts on forests and the need to keep forests as forests. But I would say that there are lots of industries that are dependent upon having healthy and abundant forests, and having access to clean water and enough water to run those their operations and produce the goods and services that they provide to the marketplace. And so, like I talked about with Georgia Pacific, being reliant upon these ecosystems for their long-term viability, I think the same can be true for lots of companies in lots of different industries. So I think that is one. Another reason is that employees and consumers want to be associated with companies that they believe are ethical and responsible. Our employees, our customers, our communities expect us to act responsibly. They know that forests provide much more than corrugated boxes and plywood, and they expect us to act efficiently and responsibly so that forests can satisfy even more needs in society. And I think as other companies are looking at the communities in which they operate, they need to find ways that they can demonstrate to those constituents that they are working proactively to take care of the environment. That's why at Georgia Pacific, we developed an endangered forest program to avoid sourcing in over 6 million acres that have high conservation value. That's why we partnered with the Arbor Day Foundation to plant more than 7 million seedlings in areas that are in need for restoration because of fire or hurricane damage. And that's why we're partnering with Keeping Forests.
I want to go back a little bit. So we are focused on water markets, whereas there's a lot of focus already on carbon markets, and biodiversity is coming to the forefront. What do you think the difference is in investing in or catalyzing a water market versus, let's say, a carbon or biodiversity market?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why it's interesting that Keeping Forests has selected to focus on water, I think, is that it is an area in which the value to society is so intuitive, but there really hasn't been a lot of effort to really both demonstrate the importance that forests play in the provision of clean and abundant water, whereas carbon, which is another important societal benefit that forests sequester carbon, is an area that has gotten a lot of attention elsewhere. And so I think that through Keeping Forests, we are raising awareness of one of the key societal benefits that forests provide in an area that probably has not gotten a significant amount of attention. The other thing that I think is interesting about it is if you look at some of the activities from a forest management standpoint that lead to improved conditions for water management, a lot of them are the same conditions and the same activities that would drive some of those additional ecosystem service benefits as well. And so it's an area that brings attention to an important need that we may not have connected as well in our minds, and doesn't necessarily require a lot of activity that would be inconsistent with or in addition to some of the activities that other benefits are looking to promote as well.
Right. So water is a co-benefit to carbon. Water is a co-benefit to biodiversity. When you manage for high quality water and quantity, you're also managing for these other services that forests provide. I was listening to a podcast yesterday on payment for ecosystem services in watersheds. And one thing that was really interesting and stood out, and they pointed this out at the very beginning, that the private sector is something like 5% or 3% of the investment in these PES water markets. It's largely governments, and then there are some NGO interests. What do you think is stopping private sector investment in emerging markets?
I think part of the challenge is trying to understand kind of how a company's stakeholders will benefit from the different activities. It's not like paying for timber, which is quite clearly a cost of goods sold and is part of the eventual product that is produced. Water can be that, but the way that it's sourced doesn't make that as clear. And so I think the way that companies should look at this is put a little bit more consideration into the conservation benefits from the standpoint of a company's role in the community, a way that we can demonstrate our commitment to be good stewards of the environment. In one sense, it helps to protect our long-term viability in the flow of our raw materials, but it also helps to let our different constituents know that we are committed to being good stewards, and this is just one example of how we are investing to achieve that.
How has GP benefited from participating in Keeping Forests?
So I think the benefit that we've had comes in a number of different areas. One is that, by participating and engaging with our peers, we've increased our knowledge on how healthy forests contribute to water quality and water quantity. I think we've also been able to both identify some relationships and some resources that's going to allow us to collaborate to become a better steward of the environment, either through Keeping Forests, but I also think we've got relationships that are going to have benefits for us more broadly. So I think that there's some opportunities that are undoubtedly going to come out of that.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm really glad to hear you say that. I hear you really emphasizing the importance of keeping forests from a relationship and network standpoint. And we had an earlier strategy spotlight that focused on our social network analysis. So for those of you who haven't seen it, go back and watch it. But I'm also very cognizant, right? The relation piece has been foundational. I think we've done a really good job at that. But I'm also cognizant, and moving into 2024, we need to demonstrate action and results, particularly with our emerging markets strategy. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and thinking about 2024, and that I'm really focused on getting us to action and investment. How would you help me pitch this to I don't know, a Coca-Cola, I don't know, some let's say some sort of textile manufacturing company? How would you help me pitch this? I need your help here, given what you know and where we want to go. How do I get them to engage with Keeping Forests and actually put some tangible investments into catalyzing a corporately funded?
Yeah, and I think a key way to get that done is to help them to understand the impacts that they can have on the health of forests in their community. I think because we are a forest products company, that tie is, kind of very apparent and very intuitive. But keeping forests as forests is not something that the forest products industry alone can do. We believe, and I believe, that land use changes when its owner determines that the land is more valuable if used for another purpose. And as more sectors of the economy kind of understand how they benefit from healthy forests, they will be more likely to invest and to keep forests as forests. A lot of these brands have large footprints in these communities. They may not necessarily rely on timber, but they certainly rely on water quality and air quality and other benefits that forests provide. And it is a value that's important to their employees. It's important to their customers, their consumers.
Yeah, so playing into that stewardship angle, and stewardship from a resource standpoint and stewardship from a community standpoint. What we know in the South is that private landowners are 86% of who owns the land in the Southeast, the forest in the Southeast. And so finding those really local solutions and helping our corporations connect with those is really important. And sometimes I feel like when we talk about our strategies, the landowners sort of sit over here to the side, even though they are very much at the center, and our solutions need to be developed in collaboration with them. It's what we're doing in South Carolina right now is very much focused on that and can blend into any other part of our emerging market strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As we conclude, John, what is one message that you would like to leave with our audience?
I think the big thing to understand is that this is not a forest products industry opportunity. Our entire economy relies upon healthy ecosystems, healthy forests, good quality and abundant water, and that there is a role for companies in virtually any sector to see value in helping to support developing these markets so that the landowners can get paid for the water that they provide to society, and that these companies can benefit from the value that they will get for their stakeholders understanding the role that they've been able to play, and that the impact that they've been able to have in their local community. We talked about the difference between carbon markets and water markets earlier. I think another critical thing to understand is in respects, carbon is a global commons, whereas water is a local commons. And what is happening in your watershed is very different, perhaps, than what could be happening in a watershed, even just several counties over. And so it is a much more local opportunity, and therefore may be something that you can have a stronger tie in terms of how you are impacting your community. And I think that's something that water in particular can provide for companies.
I love that. Thank you for bringing us back around to that. There's a local to global, which in our case, global means the southeastern region of the United States. Thank you so much for your time. It is always lovely to hear your insights. You've been what I would call an early adopter in moving with keeping forest strategies, helping to shape them and getting them to a point where we can really start to have these conversations with a broader corporate community, private sector community. So thank you, John, for everything that you shared with us today. And we'll now move into a conversation with Shay Flanagan from Conservation Resources, who will give us the impact investor lens on catalyzing corporately funded payment for ecosystem services markets. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Laura.
So we are here today with Shay Flanagan from Conservation Resources, which is a partner that has been engaged in keeping forests for a very long time. Shay is the Director of Sustainability and Strategy at Conservation Resources, and we're excited to have her here today to talk about impact investing, water markets, payment for ecosystem services, and of course, conservation finance. So thank you, Shay, for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Laura. Glad to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what Conservation Resources does?
Sure. So I'm Shay Flanagan. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Strategy for Conservation Resources, as Laura said. So Conservation Resources is an impact investment manager, meaning that we invest in forest land as well as farmland properties throughout the United States where there are working farms and working forests. And we specifically look to invest in properties where there is a stated impact or initiative or opportunity on that property where we can pair both the commodity opportunities alongside non-commodity opportunities, namely environmental benefits on these properties in ways that are mutually accretive to generating a return for our investors. And so in my role specifically, I work to develop these impact initiatives on the properties that we're investing in.
It's amazing. It's not an easy subject to tackle, is it? Bringing a lot of intelligence to the table. So tell me a little bit about how PES and specifically PES water markets play into how you think about impact and impact investing.
Sure. So PES, so payments for ecosystem services, just as a concept, is the idea that in natural systems, there are several different co-benefits produced from the system operating as it should in a healthy way, such as things that you might not think about in your everyday life, but having clean air from the forests that you're walking through, having sustainable wood products from these forests, having clean water from the filtration opportunities offered by healthy functioning forests. These all are often not necessarily appropriately valued in our economic systems. And so the idea of a payment for ecosystem services market is that does provide a way to quantify the economic benefit provided by these different ecosystem provisions and find ways to pair entities that are willing to pay to incentivize either practice changes to be made to enhance these ecosystem provisions or to incentivize ways to protect and maintain the high quality of these provisions that are already being delivered to society as a whole. Thinking about water just as an ecosystem benefit, there's two prongs basically with thinking about there's water quantity and then there's also water quality, and those can develop in different ways. Out west there's a major focus on water quantity issues. More on the eastern US, it's more of a focus on water quality.
What motivates corporations to fund or invest in PES, or what are the opportunities that exist for them when they do that?
Yeah, so what's really interesting in this space is that I think over the past number of years, there's been more of a shift towards corporations paying more attention to what's happening in each step of their supply chains. And so thinking about ways to better improve the pieces of their supply chains that could be generating, carbon or methane emissions. There's a lot of attention being paid specifically to nature-based solutions as a way to advance corporate goals focused on environmental and social impacts in that way. And so I think being able to tie that to forests and all the benefits that forests provide there's a natural link there, and I think such a scale opportunity as well that there's just natural synergies that I think are ripe to be taken advantage of, and to build those connections between corporations looking to improve their ESG initiatives and also help forest landowners who want to be able to continue to operate their forests in healthy ways.
So what's the motivation for Conservation Resources to be in this multi-sector partnership that's focused on market-driven forest conservation solutions, particularly with a lens toward supporting private landowners?
Yeah, so we are, I can't underscore it enough that we are thrilled that Keeping Forests exists as an entity, and we have loved being a supporter for the past number of years. we see it, from our perspective, it's imperative that forest landowners are properly compensated and incentivized to manage and maintain their forests in sustainable ways. We see Keeping Forests as an organization that's really at the forefront of pushing and highlighting and driving new market-based solutions to help these landowners achieve those goals, and that makes all the difference for us.
Well, thank you for that. We have a core tenet within Keeping Forests that anything that we do is collaboratively driven, that it's mutually beneficial to our partners, of course, innovative as well. How is Keeping Forests different in such a way that Conservation Resources has continued to stay involved?
I think Keeping Forests is different in a number of ways. I think what really stands out to us is that the body of Keeping Forests, in terms of the partners who are involved, already has built out such a strong core base of thoughtful leaders in that space. And I see it as kind of a really neat interwoven quilt in some ways of partners approaching these lofty and complex questions from different perspectives and being able to be really open and transparent with each other of how to, throwing ideas against the wall and working through them.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that. We've focused a lot of effort in this past year to take that base of our network. We're seeing from a social network analysis that we've done that the strength, which we all know has been the strength of the network, or the strength of Keeping Forests has been the strength of the network. And yet we're very much hungry to move into more action-based approaches. We've set ourselves up well to do that. And one of the things I'm really pushing moving forward is attracting more corporate investors, attracting more corporate perspectives into the conversation so that we actually can catalyze a payment for ecosystem services market. We're looking at that from the water lens of things. How can bringing in more corporations and more investors like you are engaged with on a daily basis, how can that help us bridge the gap between water markets and a more expansive landscape scale conservation approach?
Bringing in those types of entities in a broader and more scaled way, I think that will be really critical with filling in some of the remaining question marks that I think we have as a group in terms of being more precise with where exactly can we make things tangible on the ground. And there's such a base of industry in the Southeast US which means there's so much opportunity for having corporations that have ties to the land and ties to the land uses in the areas near where they're operating, and what that means for how that also ties up into their supply chains as you trace things back step by step. Being able to engage with corporations that are, drawing significant amounts of water or are requiring a lot of output into water systems in order to produce the goods or services that they are looking to derive from their operations, that will allow us as Keeping Forests to, I think, really narrow in on where it could make the most sense to take action.
How does the more tactical work that we're doing, or the more action-oriented work that we're getting into, help enhance Conservation Resources' impact investing philosophy?
It aligns perfectly with what we seek to do as a firm. We specifically look to invest in properties where we also can derive some sort of impact or environmental transaction, setting up structures that do enable compensation for landowners who are being effortful and thoughtful with how they manage their lands in ways that are providing these other ecosystem benefits that may not always be well defined in terms of the true economic value that they do provide, that's really key to underscoring the other benefits that we are trying to deliver, and also being able to do that in a way that achieves scale and allows us to replicate that across regions. That I think is better not only for us as a business, but also for the sector as a whole, in terms of valuing what we are delivering to the market and to society, and just all these what might be called externalities in some ways that really should be better accounted for.
What you're pointing to is Keeping Forest really tries to find the catalytic solution that is going to lift all boats, if you will, so that we're finding solutions that an impact investor or a corporation or a city, a municipality can really take on, and that it's applicable across the board. So that also speaks to scale. But we do need your expertise and what you're doing and what you're seeing and your input in that collaboration, which, Shay, you work with us on the strategy that's focused on payment for ecosystem services and our payment for ecosystem services water market. So we can't get there without knowing what's working for you, what's not working for you, your philosophy, what you see needs to be seen, what you see needs to be done across the landscape or the industry or the approach. So what is it going to take for corporations to invest in a corporately funded water market? What do they need to see?
I think what would be really helpful is that if Keeping Forests as an entity could bring something in terms of a proposal to corporations to react to that is a few steps down the road of being developed in ways that there's something tangible that these corporations can understand and see how it touches into their work. And I think what will be interesting from our perspective is exactly what that mechanism looks like and how to structure that relationship between corporations being willing to pay for this ecosystem benefit and how that actually gets delivered to these landowners.
Yes, we started some work in Mobile Bay actually a couple years ago with the idea of understanding is a water market actually viable? And the conclusion that we came to is really the only way that we could see a water market in Mobile Bay would be with corporations, and specifically as we're exploring the next step, tying that to ESG goals and the kinds of corporately responsible citizens that they want to be in the communities that they're operating in. Yes, we do need to get a little bit further down the road with something tangible, and we also need those first movers within corporations, those corporations that are really looking to do something creative and innovative and help us get there. So it's a double-edged sword. We need to move forward and have something tangible, and we also need that participation to actually get to that thing that's tangible. So very, very good points. I will conclude with one final question, which is, what would you leave our audience with about the idea of engaging in a multi-sector partnership like Keeping Forests to advance their sustainable investment strategies?
I would say, I think the overarching thread for me and for conservation resources is that the whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts for a group like Keeping Forests, and just being able to participate in the various different initiatives that Keeping Forests is developing, and particularly focusing on payments for ecosystem services for this developing water market. It's really inspiring, and the work is so important to be pushed forward. And I think it's just a reflection of the quality of the partners and the motivation behind the work being done on behalf of Laura and the Keeping Forests team, as well as all the partner organizations who are involved. That I think we really are building something special, and I can't wait to keep being able to highlight that as we go forward and help showcase that, to help continue to scale the work that we're doing and see that play out and touch down in several other spots too.
Yes, thank you. We are extremely lucky to have the partners that we have. You all are a fun and creative and risk-taking group that kind of goes along with this iterative, crazy journey that we're on. And so thank you so much for your participation in Keeping Forest. Thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to a continued relationship and supporting conservation resources and achieving their goals. So Shay, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura.